Hi, and welcome to this live stream by CloudBees. My name is Darren Pope. I'm a developer advocate at CloudBees. And today we're going to be talking about determining the health of a Jenkins plugin. And much like all the streams that we've been doing recently, I have Mark Waite with me. Mark, how are you doing today?
Great, Darren.
So we're going to talk about determining Jenkins health, Jenkins plugin health. Why do we want to talk about this?
Yeah, so Jenkins administrators oftentimes are asked a question by their users. Could you please install plugin X? Or could you please solve problem Y for me? And plugin X would do it. And the hard answer becomes, oh, except how good is plugin X? Or what impact will plugin X have on my Jenkins controller?
My joke, but not joke, is the answer is no. The first answer is no. When they argue with you politely, the answer is still no, until it's no until the end, right? Because there has to be a really good reason to install a Jenkins plugin outside of what is installed by default.
And I think that is a valid point. And I think I'm going to actually raise some counters to that in our discussion today, because there are places where I found conditions specifically for me where a plugin was a better solution than the more common solution, the more healthy solution of, why don't you just write it as a shell script, a Python script, a Ruby script, a little bit of Java, and run it from a shell or a batch step, because those are much healthier in general for the Jenkins controller, right? And
Yes.
and you're correct. That's use the things that are best at what they do, and usually that's not install another plugin.
But you're going to argue that sometimes the plugin is the right answer.
And there are very real cases. So, Darren, we're going to have such fun with this one because I have a very specific case where a plugin was exactly the right thing to do.
You're going to have to convince me pretty hard. Now, I can think of one that isn't on the list, probably, but we can talk about that one too if I think about it. But in general, the answer is no.
Right, and that's not a bad answer. Really, telling your users we should not install another plugin, you should find a better way to do this, is healthy for the users, because telling them really write it as a shell step means they can diagnose it from their desktop. They can diagnose and test it in prototype environments. They don't have to have a Jenkins controller to do the checkout, to do the work. And so validation is much better if you don't use a plugin. Yes, wholehearted agreement.
Except in the case you're going to bring up.
Right. Are you ready for that now?
I don't know. Where do you want to do? Where do you want to go first?
So I was thinking, let's take a look at, my use case is pretty obscure. So I think let's talk about the general thing first, and we'll touch on my use case eventually.
All right.
So what I thought is, I wanted to highlight that plugins.jenkins.io has most of the information that you need to decide which plugins are good for you and which are not. And many users and many administrators may not be aware of just how powerful the information is that's already on plugins.jenkins.io.
Well, let's take a look at that, because we might as well, right? Because we're here. We
Right.
have this thing called the internet, and we can use it. So let's take a look at that. Let me zoom in just a little bit. So in the case of, let's take I don't know, this little plugin called Git, and let's see what it says.
Right.
Where would we look first? Like, the first thing I look for is if I see a version that's still 0.0.1, it's not a candidate.
Good point. Okay, so already top right-hand corner, you hit a first thing. Is this plugin relatively mature? And version numbers are a good hint for maturity, right? Okay. If it's 0.0.1 or 0.8, you wonder, is this thing mature? Okay,
unless I know the developer.
Right.
Right. If I personally know the developer of it, and he's like, "Hey, can you check this out?" No problem. Be glad to.
Exactly, and there are different contexts to answer that question, right? If I'm in my prototype environment where I'm doing experiments, I may not care. I may say, fine, I'll take it because it's a throwaway environment. But on my production environment, that version number in the top right-hand corner is a good first indicator. Is this thing mature? Now, right below it is another indicator of relative health, right? It's different if something was released a month ago or released 7 or 8 years ago. And we have plugins that have been released 7 or 8 years ago that are valid plugins that are useful still for some interesting cases, but you need to think carefully before you choose to install a plugin that's that old. Yes, it probably still works, but why choose that one if you could just write a shell step to do the same thing?
Right. Do you consider this next line
That's
problematic
also,
too?
It's not as problematic, but it's again an indicator. So which Jenkins version is the minimum Jenkins version is a good story to tell, because the Jenkins Update Center only supports about 1 year of releases. And so the version that you see here, this is a really good story. 2.289.1 is already very near the edge of the Jenkins Update Center. And so it's one where this one will probably be updated relatively soon to use a much newer version. If you see a Jenkins 2.1164 or a Jenkins 1. Something, that's an indicator, this thing is probably not actively maintained.
Okay.
Now,
how about this next line? Should this be an indicator of should I look at this plugin or not?
It's another piece of data for the install count is certainly another piece of data for the administrator to consider. Something with 1,000 installations, knowing that Jenkins has 300,000, 1,000 is a small number in a world of 300,000. 289,000 is a large number in the world of now. However, if you say, oh no, but it must be greater than some number, that's actually not a good choice, because, for instance, the configuration as code plugin, deeply valuable, really helpful, marvelous, and really well maintained, yet its install count is something under 100,000. And that's perfectly okay. So don't let a small install count be some sort of a barrier to you, but it's rather another piece of data.
Okay. What else could I tell from plugins?
Well, so one of the other pieces in the story is the documentation that's on the page, and you can look through the documentation and decide, back of the envelope estimate, is this thing documented? And what you're showing is, as you scroll through it, wow, there's a lot of text here. It's documented. Okay, so that might indicate goodness. Oftentimes, low usage plugins are short on documentation because the original author created just enough to describe what they wanted. And so, is it documented? Good thing to check here.
Okay. Let's talk about maintainers.
Well, actually, so yes, let's do, because that's another good piece of data. So that maintainers entry on the right-hand column there tells us who are the people known to the repository as being able to deliver a release. And in this particular plugin, there are 4. Many plugins, there are 1 or 0. And if a plugin has 0 maintainers, or if the plugin has the nice little label at the top that says adopt this plugin, that's a hint to you that that plugin is not being actively maintained. And if it's not being actively maintained, that should decrease your interest in that plugin. That sort of goes against it in terms of how healthy is it.
Okay. So, we picked this one because it's got sort of all the good check marks. Do we have one that we could look at that's not so healthy?
Actually, let's look at a piece of this that actually looks unhealthy, and we have to declare why it's an exception. Click the Issues tab across the top, and we'll wait patiently.
Oh, this one.
Yes, exactly. Now we're going to have to wait for a little bit. All right, so it's usually unhealthy if there's a large number of issues against the plugin. And you scroll this thing, and it just keeps going and going and going. There are over 500 open issues against this plugin. And that's right. Look at that, the size of that scroll bar. That should be an indicator, maybe this isn't as healthy as I'd like. And
13 years ago.
Exactly.
Last touched 6 years ago. So it sounds like you're almost on track to at least make another comment on it now. It's been set almost 7 years, so it's almost time to do it again.
Right. Well, and what the storytelling for this particular plugin is that there are many enhancement requests, there are many bug reports that are intentionally left alone so that we don't risk disturbing existing use cases. It's a
Like-
bug.
Yeah, 300,000, almost 300,000 installs. You want to be very slow and careful as a maintainer touching this thing.
Well, and that some of the things that I deem bugs, and they are valid to declare it's a bug, are intentionally left alone, and many of them even have automated tests that check that the bug is still there, because that's the level of paranoia that this particular plugin likes to behave with in terms of preserving behavior. People perceive Jenkins as business critical, right? It has to keep working the way they want it to work. And sometimes that means a bug cannot be fixed, because if the bug is fixed, it will break them.
It's not a bug, it's a feature.
Right, and that's a terrible story to tell, right? That's sort of an embarrassing way to tell a story, that it's not a bug, it's a feature, but for some people, it's actually very real that the bug is important to them. So a good story here. Now, if we look again at the right-hand side, there are other things to look at. If you click, for instance, on the links section that's on the right, you'll see there's a GitHub link that takes you to the repository, and Open Issues link. So click that Open Issues link, and we're going to look at Jira for a different view of those reports. So this gives you, and each plugin on plugins.jenkins.io has one of these issue links. And some plugins, it takes you to GitHub, where they're tracking their issues in GitHub. Some plugins, it takes you to Jira, issues.jenkins.io. And this gives you a chance as an administrator to say, I should probably look at the list of bug reports, in particular recent bug reports, to decide if there's something in that would lobby against me allowing this plugin into the system.
Got it. Okay. What else?
Well, so another indicator, that pipeline step reference that's down below, about midway down the links list, most Jenkins jobs are now pipeline. We want that. That's very desirable. We like that. But that means users need to know how to use that plugin as pipeline steps. And if you click on pipeline step reference, it's going to take us to a page that talks about this particular plugin. It shows, okay, here's the step, and here's the documentation. And notice length of scroll bar matters here. Again, it's a first hint. Oh, is this thing well described? Does it give me examples? Does it encourage me to use good practices? Does it tell me about the snippet generator? Those kinds of things. And this one, okay, it does that. Now, there's a weakness here that it doesn't tell you about another very important piece that you have to find elsewhere. So that's the tragedy of it. The checkout step is a different thing.
Okay. Let's go back to here. Okay.
So
else?
now, well, other things that might weigh on your decision is, as you go further down, you'll see there's a good one right there, the previous security warnings. Now, some plugins have open pending security, open known security warnings. So, Darren, I want you to open up a new tab on plugins.jenkins.io, and let's look for Lucene, Lucene, and let's look at the Lucene search plugin as an example of this.
Plugins. Okay, there we go. And Lucene. Not Lucy, Lucene.
That's right, not Lucy, Lucene.
Okay.
Okay, so that big pink box up at the top should be an immediate no. If there's an open security issue, you should definitely not bring in this plugin. You need really compelling reasons to willingly bring in a plugin with known security issues.
Right.
This one has 132 installations. Okay, small install count. The last release was a year ago. Okay. Those are all hints that, hey, this one is probably not a great choice for you, because, all right, now if we scroll further down, I suspect we'll see exactly one maintainer. And now if you said, okay, what else could we know? Well, click on the GitHub link for this one and let's go look at its repository, because another thing that we could check is when was the last commit?
Right.
And the last commit here was a year ago.
Right.
So the hints are in this one, okay, and not to fault the maintainer of this plugin. Plugin maintainers don't always stick around. Now this one gives us some more hints. If we look at, for instance, back to the GitHub page, you'll see it there. Notice in the top right under the About column, Jenkins plugin for searching job data via Lucene or Solar, and then right below it there's a hyperlink. That hyperlink goes to a dead system. If you click that link, I think it will actually take us to plugins.jenkins.io instead.
It does. Yeah, it redirects.
But the hint there is, okay, the maintainer did not update that to point to the correct location. So it's another indication this plugin is not very actively maintained.
And I will say again, no ding against the maintainer.
No,
right?
no.
It's just because even plugins that are maintained a lot are still catching up on this, basically the modernization of a plugin, which we did a whole big series about that. This is one of those steps. Is just updating this link. So
exactly, and that is, and the reality of open source is that we are relying on each other as volunteers, and we're accepting that each person gets to choose how they spend their time and which things they do or don't do. We don't get to demand anything from anyone in terms of community involvement. If they're available, we're grateful. And if they're not available, we don't give that as any fault at all.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to talk about on this one?
I think, yeah, so this one showed it already, but
Okay.
documentation source is another interesting one, and
Okay.
it doesn't show it here because this one's already made the conversion, but some plugins will have a field in the sort of right-hand side of their let's see, you know what, I can give you an exact
Give me
plugin.
one. Yep.
Yeah, just a minute, Darren, let me look one up. I've got a report that shows Ansible. Look for
That's
Ansible.
it. Okay.
Okay, so the Ansible plugin has 20,000 installations. It's got a reasonable number, right? But was
Yep.
last released 2 years ago. Now, if you scroll further down, what you'll see is help us improve this page. It's sort of at the bottom right-hand corner. It says this content is served from the Jenkins wiki export, which is now permanently offline. What that means is the plugin documentation here that's being presented on the left-hand side of the page is actually scraped from an old archive that was deprecated in 2019, made read-only in 2020, and is no longer being updated. So it cannot be current, right? It can't be modern because it's an old source.
Right.
So if the plugin you're considering is using the wiki as its documentation source, that says it's not been updated in a while.
There's a long list of things you need to take into consideration when deciding to take a plugin.
Well, and it's back to the story that the argument you presented originally. The default answer should generally be no, right? The default answer, it's perfectly okay to say, no, let's talk about this, or no, let's get a better understanding why you think that's necessary, because I think we can solve the problem in a better technique without installing one more plugin.
Okay. So where do we head next?
Well, so I think let's take a look at let's go to a repository and look at its open pull requests as another example. So pick any of the plugins. So Git plugin is a good choice, right?
All right. So we have 19 pull requests as of today.
And if you click the pull request tab, you could scroll down and see how old are they and what flavor are they. And when I say flavor here, what I mean is, are these feature requests? Are they hints at bug requests? Are they Dependabot proposing to upgrade a dependency that no one's processed? And each of those has a different flavoring to, hey, is this thing healthy or not, right? This has 3 and 4-year-old pull requests that look like they're mostly enhancement requests. Other plugins you may see, oh, hey, it's got 5 or 6 pending dependency updates that haven't been processed. Those are relatively minor, but if they're not being processed, it may indicate, not being as actively maintained as you might like.
Another indicator I would take if you're looking at the GitHub repo is look at the number of forks.
Oh, right.
It's a complete vanity metric.
Yep.
But if nobody's forking this plugin, then that means probably you've got no extra help, if you will, trying to help maintain it, or people aren't forking it and running it a custom bake of it themselves. Right? If the fork number is 1, that means it's just you.
Exactly. So. Good point. Very good point. And again, a hint of how healthy or unhealthy is the thing. If it's been forked frequently, that indicates lots of interest, right? It may not tell you. That's not an ultimate metric, as you said. It's a vanity metric, but still, it's an indicator.
Okay. PRs, forks.
Right.
What else?
Yeah, I think that covers the sort of most interesting topics. You wanna take on the controversial one now?
Not yet. I want
Okay.
to call it one more thing.
Okay.
Again, if a plugin does not need to be updated, like if it's a super simple plugin, back before time, there was a plugin called Green Balls.
Right.
Because people didn't like blue, they wanted green. Mm-hmm. And you take a look at that plugin, and it really had not been updated in years, but it did not need to be based on what it did. So you sort of have to, understand the plugin well enough to understand if it needs to be updated a lot. Like to me, knowing that the Git plugin is something to me that is core, right? I'm working with Git all the time. I'm expecting to see a release preferably at least once a month-ish.
Right.
Or at least I want to see patterns that it is being actively maintained.
Correct. And that's certainly a healthy pattern to look at the list of releases and decide, hey, is there a pattern that hints that this thing is getting some care and feeding? And there may be large gaps. If you want to take a look at a different sort of release pattern, Darren, let's, in a new tab, open up plugins and look for the word Apache.
Okay.
Because this hints at one of the class of things that doesn't get a frequent release. So that top leftmost Apache HTTP Components Client. Okay, notice the word API in its title. API plugins are a special class of plugin in that what they do is they bundle a library from some external source, in this case Apache HTTP Components, and they then package it for use by other plugins. Therefore, the only time this thing actually needs to release is when the upstream library on which it is based also releases.
Right, and you can see that here. Well, this changelog is not the changelog I'm thinking. Another one, because the other one I would think of is HTTP.
Yes, that's another library plugin, absolutely.
Right. Even though it's not called out as a library plugin here. And maybe that would be something to go back to the community with. It's like, okay, if these plugins are API plugins that should not be used by themselves, they're not meant to be used by themselves.
Right.
Then these are usually dependencies. That's the way to say this. Now, that opens up another can of worms. I'm looking for plugin X to do my thing, but plugin X has dependencies on, Z, Y, and A.
Correct.
And my plugin X looks really good. Active, it looks like the Git plugin, right? It's active, it's a lot of things, but the dependencies of that plugin, I'm not saying this of Git, but the dependency of plugin X are not as well maintained. Should that concern me at all?
It could be. So if you click the dependencies tab here, again, the plugin site gives us a view to that. This plugin has relatively few, in fact, it has no required dependencies. But you notice down below it says dependent plugins, and we see a lot of plugins that depend on it.
Right.
And that gives us, oh yeah, okay, so this tells me its relationship in the ecosystem. This thing is depended upon by other crucial plugins, GitHub and GitHub API, GitHub branch source. That means this plugin is probably installed on most every Jenkins installation that accesses GitHub.
Right. But if we were to go back to, let's go back to the Git plugin real quick. Because I want to look at that same dependencies, because again, that's going to be a leading indicator, right? You've got X number of required dependencies.
It does, and you can see these, and you get some hint. Okay, why would the Git plugin depend on pipeline? Oh, because it implements pipeline. Why would it depend on credentials? Oh, because it uses credentials. Why would it depend on mailer? Okay, because sometimes it sends mail. So the dependencies here, but now the optional dependencies are okay. Yeah, those are valid, but thankfully I am not mandated to install them if I install the Git plugin. It will use them if they exist.
So the way that you just said that, I'm going to clarify it a little bit differently. If you install the Git plugin, these are going to be required and will be automatically installed for you.
Right.
If you already had these, that's fine. But if you need configuration as code, okay, I'm saying this backwards. So why are these considered optional? Give me a case to where configuration as code or one of those is not optional. Like, at what point does it become required?
So it's required if I need to use configuration as code in that sense.
Okay.
But the Git plugin, you said it exactly correctly earlier. When I install the Git plugin, the required dependencies will be installed if not already installed.
Right.
And absolutely, the Git plugin will not operate correctly without the required dependencies. And the plugin manager will absolutely take care of you and make sure that they are installed.
Whether you want it to help you out or not.
Exactly, because the Git plugin cannot operate without those required dependencies. However, if one of the optional dependencies is installed, then additional capabilities are provided by the Git plugin that depend on that optional dependency. So the Git plugin won't attempt to give you configuration as code unless you have the configuration as code plugin.
Right. And this plugin obviously
has a few dependencies, has a few plugins that depend upon it. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
And then some optionals, right? There's just so much
Right.
here, especially this one plugin. And there's a handful of these class of plugins
Right, exactly.
that are, how do we call them? Slow moving, maybe? Not necessarily slow moving, but cautious to release, maybe is the better way to say it.
And I think that's a good way, that's a charitable way to say it. What, for me, the real story is, hasn't yet adopted continuous delivery. When it adopts continuous delivery, it will become a little more fast-moving.
Right.
It will still be carefully shepherded, but it'll be more fast-moving. I like plugins that have adopted continuous delivery because they tend to get more frequent releases and smaller feature increments in each release.
Okay, before we go and take a look at the plugin that I'm going to vehemently disagree with you on,
Okay.
because I don't know what it is. I haven't looked at it.
Great.
Let's try to answer a question here. So on plugin updates, is there a way to identify plugins with breaking changes without looking into each changelog?
Okay. So there's a yes, but. Are you okay if I give a yes, but answer?
As long as you give the but side of it, yes.
Absolutely. Okay, so yes, there is a way to identify things that have breaking changes. We just saw this with the SSH Build Agents plugin. Ivan Fernandez Calvo released a new version of the SSH Build Agents plugin, and in that new release, he specifically flagged it so that users would see a message that says this plugin has breaking changes. And so the administrator got a message that says this plugin has breaking changes. And it's then the administrator is expected to go look at the release notes to see why the maintainer says it has breaking changes. In the case that Ivan did, what the breaking change was is it no longer supports Java 8 for agents, and it requires Jenkins 2.361.1 or newer. Now, to me, actually, that highlights the next challenge, which is I wouldn't have even called that a breaking change. That's a natural outcome of requiring Jenkins 2.361.1. But Ivan wanted to be sure people knew this thing will require Java 11 on the agent. Now, that's one half, right? The other half is there a way to identify plugins with breaking changes? The reality is, on a 100% case, no, because, for example, Git client plugin 3.11.2 or 4.11.2, I forget the exact number, was a breaking change for many users. It had a security fix in it, and the security fix was a fix for something on which they relied. So they depended on the fact that the Git client was ignoring the SSH host key. And we said, no, that's not safe. We have to check the SSH host key to defend against a man-in-the-middle attack. And the users correctly said, hey, that's a breaking change, but you made a breaking change in something where you incremented the far right digit, right? 4.11.2 became 4.11.3, something like that. So is there a way to identify plugins with breaking changes? Yes, for those cases where the plugin maintainer knows they're making a breaking change and can describe it to you. Is there a general purpose way to find things that will break you in your installation? Not really. You've got to do testing, you've got to assess it, you've got to validate it.
So yes, but.
Right.
So also, since we're at the bottom of the hour too, I want to, and Christoph, I hope that helped. Mark explained that very well. One of the reasons why we're here today is to talk about where we're going to be in, can you believe it, 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks from today is the start of DevOps World. Well, the start of the Jenkins Contributor Summit is 2 weeks from today. Is that right? Yeah, it is. Today is Tuesday, right?
It is.
So, if you're planning on coming out to DevOps World, we look forward to seeing you there. Now look, if you haven't signed up yet, 2 weeks out, it's getting close. You can save $400 off the registration fee of $1,350. The way you do that, there is a discount code. When you sign up, it's DW22 Jenkins RTE. Again, DW22 Jenkins RTE. Now, we're not going to get, we'll talk more about this in a few minutes, but I have my paper this week. And this tells me what the resort fee includes. So if you're staying on property, enhanced in-room wireless internet for up to 6, count them, 6 devices. This one, they have an on-site water park. So if you're bringing your family down, daily admission to River Falls Water Park for up to 4 guests. And a bunch of other things we'll talk about later. Water park. Do you think anybody's actually even going to show up for the hallway track if they have free access to a water park?
Yeah, you remind me. I need to pack my swimsuit. That sounds like fun, actually.
Yeah, it's going to be mid-80s during the day, low 70s at night. It's just what Central Florida is this time of year. Expect rain from 2 to 4 p.m. At some point, and then life goes on. So, okay. Are we ready to talk about this crazy plugin that I'm going to fight you on?
We are absolutely ready to talk about it.
Okay, what is it?
Okay, so actually I want to describe my use case first, Darren, because it should focus on what's the problem we're trying to solve.
Okay.
One of the challenges that I have is I need to be able to validate, is something reported by a user actually a bug or not? And the way I do that validation actually right now is with Jenkins jobs. So a user reports a bug. They say such and such fails in this freestyle project. And I say, oh, freestyle projects are kind of the old way of doing things, but they still are used by quite a number of places. I need to validate that bug. I then want a way to check that that bug is real or that that bug is fixed. And I like being able to do all those things inside a Jenkins job. Now, okay, but it's a freestyle project. How would I do that? Well, it turns out I've discovered this little plugin called Text Finder. Text Finder lets me search the console log and or files for a regular expression and set the status of the job based on it. So in my bug check job, I can run this little freestyle job that illustrates the bug, and then at the end of it, I invoke the Text Finder plugin and ask it, please tell me if this message was in the log or not. Thus, I wanted the Text Finder plugin, and now Jesse Glick wondered why I wanted the Text Finder plugin, because it's a pretty old, obscure plugin.
He's not the only one. I'm still trying to figure out why you want it. I mean, you
Okay.
explained it. You've laid out the story. If I was the administrator, I would say, heck no. Come up with a different way.
Well, and now to give the answer to that, why not use a different way? Okay, I could add additional shell steps to the end of my freestyle job to do some of that checking, but now I've got to figure out how to read the console log from inside that shell step. And reading the console log inside the shell step is complicated. Yes, I can do it with REST API calls. Yes, I know it's possible. It's just a lot more work than using this plugin.
Still no.
Clearly, you and I are not administering the same Jenkins controller, Darren. That's interesting.
No. I mean, okay, if it's only yours and the blast radius is just you, then fine. But come on. I mean, all right. So let's go there for just a second. I'm going to take us there. Text. What was it called?
Text Finder plugin.
All right. So let's apply some of the things that we've talked about up to this point.
Right.
So Text Finder, this one.
Yep.
It was released a week ago. Okay, come on. All right, this isn't fair. I was hoping it was going to say 10
Oh,
years
no,
ago.
no. Actually, it is fair, because look at it, because we're going to see that the release pattern is very spotty, right?
Okay,
Even if it
fair
was
enough.
released ago, we're going to see that the release pattern is very spotty.
Okay, so released a week ago, so that's a red herring.
Right. Well, look
And
at
well, okay, so let's say it. A week ago, that looks pretty good.
Right.
Because I don't know anything else yet.
Right.
It requires 289. Okay, 289 is reasonable. I'm good with that.
yes-ish.
It's ish. As I'm saying, it's getting on the outer edge. If I
Right.
knew that, it's like, okay, it's not a 2.1x something, right? It's
Right.
not old. 8,000 installs, okay, not great, but
That's actually quite low in this world. So 8,000 installs for something like this that's doing freestyle and pipeline, okay, that's a little exotic.
right. I am in the Jenkins community, and I see Basil and Jesse. That's like, okay, these are two of sort of the OGs that have been around for a long time. So if they wrote it, there must have been a use case for it. So, all right, so I'm sort of going along this line, right? I started at the left, and I'm working my way through the line, and it's gone up a little bit, it's gone down a little bit, so I'm still
Right.
I'm basically still level at this point, right?
Yep.
Maybe up just a little bit, and then I come over to releases. A week ago, okay, great. 4 months ago, okay, 4 months. 8 months ago, 2 months, 2 months, a year.
So now you start
Right.
seeing 1 year gaps, and first release
6 year
12 years
gaps.
ago. Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And now if you look inside those releases, you see, what's the primary thing for the release a week ago just increased the Jenkins baseline.
Right.
Okay, that's a
not
nice
a thing.
maintenance step, but it's not really adding any value. The one before that, Java 17. Okay, again, not substantial value.
Dependencies. I'm not seeing anything here. It's like, why?
Exactly, right. So in terms of the core feature set, the last core feature set right there, you're on screen, 2.15, I think it was.
What, 15? Okay, right here. Yeah, bug fix. Yeah.
Yes, a null pointer exception bug fix. And if you go one further, 1.14, that one, there were a couple of bug fixes, and that's about it. So is this thing actively being developed? No, it's not. See?
Nope.
See?
I'm still nope. There's no way I'd let you install this.
And on a large scale installation, you probably shouldn't, right? Because large scale installation with many users, this one may not be a great choice, right? It's too niche, because yes, it supports pipeline, so that's a plus for it.
Yep.
But really, there are much better ways to do what it's doing, and there are, or maybe much better is the wrong way, but there are ways to do what it's doing without having to use a plugin to do it.
All right, let's look at issues. Let's try to apply the things here. So issues. Okay, not many.
Right.
The oldest one's 13 years ago. Okay, fine. Dependencies, no requirements. That's good, Right. So
Right.
that moves the level up a little bit. Mm-hmm. The implied, okay, since I know that these three are just sort of core, they're there pretty much all the time. Not concerned about that.
Right.
No, okay, this no depend on this one. So that's good. So I know this is a standalone as the level of green balls. Right. This one's as standalone as possible.
Right. Exactly.
Let's see, what else do I see here? I see a pipeline step reference. Let's just for grins.
Yeah. So
Basil.
let's see how well or poorly its pipeline steps are described.
Not so great. I'll be blunt because I
Exactly.
I really dislike. I almost use the H word on this. This type of documentation for a pipeline step is useless to me.
Exactly. And you're correct. This is actually worse than just telling people go use the pipeline syntax step generator, the syntax generator, right? If this had at least a note that said, please use the step generator, people would know, oh, that's what I should do. But instead, it's got a list of arguments and their data type, but not any other real hints.
Now, fortunately, these are named pretty reasonably. So if I knew what it was, like I could probably figure it out. But again, I'm not going to figure out how to piece it together from this.
Correct.
That's where the step generator would get me there. So that's fine. Okay. Where else did we look at? So
Okay, so there's one more that as a
Okay.
plugin maintainer, we have to go there. We're getting near the
Okay.
end of our time. Click the view detailed version information and wait patiently.
this one.
That top right-hand corner thing under the 8900, yeah. So it's going to bring up, now you look at this and say, wow, that's an ugly sheet, right? What this is this is a tool for plugin maintainers that tells them across the top, what's my plugin version?
Right.
Okay, so 1.6 through 1.19. Down the left-hand column is my Jenkins version controller.
Right.
And in the cells is install counts of that Jenkins version and this plugin version. So as you're going down, you're seeing, oh my sakes, there are people running really old versions of Jenkins. Thankfully, it's relatively few. But as you keep going down the list, keep going, keep going, keep going. This is his plugin with a long history. And now we're getting into, keep going, because we haven't even yet reached the point of Update Center supported. Okay, now we're getting to the point where Update Center still supports these, keep going. And now you see, oh, look, there's some numbers in the right-hand side. Now, if you'll hover over one of those numbers, say on the 2.332.1 line,
Okay.
if you hover over that 33, for instance, with your mouse, what you'll see is a little text that will tell you, oh, this percentage of installations of this version are using such and such. It's a really cool story. This data helps plugin maintainers. For users, doesn't tell you much other than how bad other people are at deciding if they should upgrade a plugin or not.
Right. And because of how I'm sharing, you're not seeing the pop-up.
Right.
I'm
right.
seeing it, but you're not seeing it. So
Right.
yeah.
So that distribution down at the bottom is another hint. Oh, let's see. 8,000, 8,900, so almost 9,000. 2,500, so roughly 25% of them are on the current version. All right, that's okay. That gives me a hint how many people are not upgrading to current version. If we go back a few, back to 1.15, we've probably got roughly half of all installs covered in the last 5 releases. Now, if we were to do something similar with the Git plugin, it's a much, much worse table. We won't do that, but it hints that, okay, there's data here that can help me make decisions about whether or not I should accept this plugin. And that's all that I wanted to say on that.
Okay. Wow. No, you're still not installing this. No.
Oh, Darren, I am just astonished. Here I'm the most technically credible person I know myself. Okay, maybe not, huh?
What else? So, all right, let's try to recap this real quick. Somebody comes to you, you're the Jenkins administrator, that's like, install this plugin. Your answer is no. If they're the one that signs the paycheck, the answer still should be no.
Well,
Because if you install it and it breaks, then you're still out of a job anyway.
Right, exactly, right. It's probably even more important if they're the person who signs the paycheck, because then the answer should be no with a rationale. No, because it increases the maintenance burden. No, because it increases our risk. And no, because there are better ways to do this usually than by installing a plugin. That doesn't mean you don't have plugins in your Jenkins controller. You certainly do. You have the plugins that you absolutely need. Pipeline, yes, absolutely. Git, yes. If you're using a particular branch source, like if you're using a particular provider like GitHub, you probably want their branch source provider. If you're using Bitbucket or Gitty or GitLab, you want their branch source provider. Absolutely, no question.
Yep.
Those things are core to the functionality, but rather obscure plugins or plugins whose only value is replace a shell step with something else, nah. Use a shell step or use the batch file or the PowerShell.
Or again, go back and write your own CLI. If a shell script just sounds, just weird to you, pick your language. Like right now, Go. The reason why I like Go, and you can even do this with other languages too, it compiles down to a standalone binary. You don't need a runtime, right? That's what you want. So if you know that you're going to be running, like the case of using something like Cobra with Go, to where you create your CLIs, and then you can bake it for ARM64, AMD64, Mac, Windows. You get what was promised with Java. Am I saying this out loud? You get write once, compile, and then run anywhere. You have to throw in that extra and compile for. But to me, I'm worth that. I'm willing to take that compile.
Absolutely,
It's worth it to me.
And it's that kind of thing, right? Where if you choose to create a command line interface, you have also likely benefited your developers because they'll call your command line interface as well. It's not just your Jenkins jobs that will benefit. Everybody will benefit in your organization because you created a CLI for your thing.
Right, because in creating that CLI, and we're going off the rails here just a little bit, but if you create a CLI, and let's say you're using, I'll pick Ansible Tower, just for your deploy side of things. You're using Jenkins to get into a binary repository or a registry or something, and then you're using Ansible Tower to do the heavy lifting for deployments. That CLI can be used on both sides. If you were to write something just as a, number one, maybe just as a shared library thing, all written in whatever scripted syntax effectively in a shared library, that's not helping anybody except you. Whereas if you write a good CLI that can be run anywhere by anybody, yes, you've sort of gotten yourself into a corner because now you're the person that owns that, but maybe that's not such a bad thing.
Right. Well,
right?
It's you're going to own something, right?
Yes.
Either you'll own the CLI or you'll own something that you implemented inside Jenkins. And choosing which of those two you own should be based on what's comfortable for you. And for me, a CLI is a better choice, right? I can maintain it separately. I don't have to stand up an entire Jenkins controller to test it. Yeah.
I'm going to argue the point just a little bit more. It's not just that it makes me comfortable, it's going to be what's best for the organization.
Yes. Yep.
Because if I'm in a shop that's all Java and I want to do Go and I would be the only person doing Go, wrong answer. The solution in that case needs to be Java. It just has to be. Well, it doesn't have to be, but it's a strong vote in that direction.
Well, and then it's healthy to persuade the teams that are consuming it to also become its owners and maintainers, right?
Yeah.
Hey, look, you're a consumer. Why don't you become a contributor to this CLI as well? Yep.
And of course,
or this interface.
Yeah, and again, now with Graal VM being able to bake native images, now you can't. I mean, it takes a lot longer, but you can bake a native image using Graal. So I've done that I wrote one thing, compiled it for Windows, compiled it for Mac, and actually compiled it for Linux. And it all worked. It took forever, but it worked. Not in a bad way because I'm running underpowered hardware on purpose. So, okay. One more thing. We have to talk about it one more time, if I can find it. We have to talk about DevOps World. And we'll pick right where we left off. We were talking about 1350. If you use the code that's up on the screen now, DW22 Jenkins RTE, go to DevOpsWorld.com, use that code. Your registration price is going to be $950. Again, DevOpsWorld.com. Let me go through the list just a little bit more. And by the way, here, let's get off this part here. Here's the schedule. The schedule. So Tuesday is really workshops, but in this case, since you're here watching this, you want to come to the Jenkins Contributor Summit. Now, in order to get into the Contributor Summit, you still have to have a ticket. Correct, Mark?
Correct. It's no charge, but you do need to register. Absolutely.
Right. You still have to be registered for DevOps World. So if you're in Orlando, if you can get to Orlando, Mark's going to be there. I'm going to be running in and out because of other responsibilities for the conference. Santa's going to be there. Santa's Jean-Marc. Bruno's there. Santa, I know him.
Nobody else knows him as Santa.
Santa. Who else? Basil's going to be there.
No, so Basil won't be there. But
he's not there.
Tim Jacome will be there. Jan Farachek will be there. Uli Hoffner will be there. Alex Brandes will be there. We've got a bunch of people there. Vadek Folonia will be there. Alyssa will be there. So we've got most of the officers there. Damien Deportal will be there. We're looking for a good
lot of people. Okay. So just a couple more items from what's included in the resort fee. I talked about two of them that I never talked about before. Here's one. Daily scheduled shuttle service to the Disney parks for up to 4 guests. Do you get a rhythm here? There's always a 4 here somewhere. Nightly scheduled, and I messed up on this when we've talked about this before. I've said Downtown Disney. They've renamed it. Nightly scheduled shuttle service to Disney Springs. Used to be known as Downtown Disney. Up to 4 guests. Now here's the one we've talked about before. I'm going to read it word for word just so I don't mess it up. A bucket of golf balls. Now, where I'm from, a bucket means a 5-gallon bucket. I'm sure it's not going to be that. But it's a bucket of golf balls in use of rental clubs at the driving range daily, for up to, guess how many guests, Mark?
4?
4 guests.
Okay.
And finally, if you're really into golf and you've brought your clubs with you, the course actually looks pretty nice. I don't play golf, but it looks to be nice. Again, it's Florida. 15% discount off retail rates for green fee rates. So if, again, you don't see a session you want to go to and the hallway track is not looking the way you want it to look, maybe you're going to go play golf. And you're not having to drive off property to do it. Right? DevOpsWorld.com, $950 with the coupon code DW22 Jenkins RTE. The agenda's up on the screen. Party Tuesday night. So you spend all day with Mark and crew at the Jenkins Contributor Summit. Go to a party Tuesday night. Wednesday, Thursday night, another party. All we know is party, right? At least on the front and the back side of the conference.
We've got a bunch of great presentations. Looking forward to the presentations. Excited for workshops, for experiences, and yes, for the Contributor Summit.
Okay. So for everybody that's been here with us live today, thanks for hanging out. If you're watching the replay, thanks for watching the replay again. Coupon code down right below Mark, DW22 Jenkins RTE. We'll save you $400 off, be $950. We'll be back again next Tuesday with something else. And we'll also be talking about what's going to be happening in October. Don't forget about it. So for everybody here, thanks for hanging out with us. And we will talk to you again, really, technically, next Tuesday, same time. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you then.